Hello, it's Cate Stillman with the Yoga Healer podcast. And today I'm having a conversation with Anna Berkelmans, who's on the Yoga Healer team, about outgrowing your friends. And it's going to be a bit of like signs and symptoms, and I'd say normalizing this conversation. So many of you know that I've been a leader at Yoga Healer for 20 years and coaching people to essentially have breakthroughs, first in their body and then in setting and achieving their unique life goals. And in the process, often or almost always, perhaps without exception, people run into this question of like, they're noticing that they're outgrowing their friends. And they really, what I see it as a sign of is they're making new friends, and they're having more powerful on-point relationship that's in alignment with who they're becoming next, with their emergent personality, with their emergent identity. And then they notice that their past identity, which includes their past relationships, now are not as engaging for them. Like they're not as all in, and they start to notice things, and these things start to bother them. And maybe they notice that when they get together with their certain friend, their friend always complains. And complains usually about, same cast of characters, different time, right? It's just a week later, complaining essentially about the same types of things. Whether it's the boss, whether it's the partner, whether it's the kids, whether it's themselves, right? And their own ability to follow through on what they want. And then what often happens is the course member, someone in our course who's actually reaching new heights and attaining higher level experiences for themselves and their body, feeling better, releasing outdated patterns of the past, which could be weight, which could be pain, which could be digestive issues, which could be sleep issues. So they're like feeling better, and they actually want to talk about feeling better. But the pattern with their friends is to actually go to what I call the lowest common denominator, where it's like the conversation actually downward spirals to who can complain more, who's got it more worse. And they start to realize that like, oh my gosh, if I'm engaging in that conversation, that's where my awareness is going. And then I don't feel as good after those conversations. I don't feel inspired and energized and uplifted and motivated to actually take more aligned action as I do when I'm with course members or in coaching sessions where I'm actually with people who are growing rapidly and very life positive and actually looking for potentiality rather than looking for, a scapegoat.
Hey, can you talk about the importance of having the space to reflect? These conversations happen in real time, and how we receive these conversations gives us really important feedback about our relationship to ourselves. So can you talk about how we can optimize taking space to receive that feedback?
Yeah, and there's a few components I think going on here. Is like, one is we always notice these things. And then do we allow ourselves to notice what we're noticing? So if we've just gotten together with some friends or a friend and afterwards just checking in, like, did I learn something? Right? Did I leave inspired and motivated to be a better version of myself? Did I have fun? Did I laugh? Like earnestly laugh? And it can just be a little checklist of those things. And if so, it's like, then that is the reflection. That takes some time to actually feel what you're feeling. And so whether it's you go for a walk with a friend, or whether it's like you get together and drink tea with a friend, or get together and drink beer with a friend, is like afterwards asking yourself, like, did I learn something? Did I laugh? Like, am I a better version of myself? Am I more motivated to take positive actions that'll help me feel better in the future and be a better person in the future? And if so, you're like, yeah, good. We should do more things together. Like, that's right on. And if afterwards you're like, no, then it just can help you then make better decisions. And maybe you need to have a conversation with that friend that says like, hey, I'd like to try us hanging out in a different way. And we can talk about, it's actually in Body Thrive in the book. There's a chapter on how to change your habits and relationship, which is like a step-by-step manual, that chapter. And it's on Amazon. It's where books are sold. But, the long and the short of it is, if we're not digesting our experiences and we leave, the situation, the conversation, the regular outing with our friend, and then we just, pick up the phone and check the news or go into some social app and distract ourselves and then go on to the next thing. What often happens is there's the residue positive that we haven't actually processed. Like if I learned something, well, like, was there an action step there? Like, was there a resource I'm supposed to check in with and get, or, it's like allowing there's a term in yoga called soma. And it's like it's like allowing the best to rise to the top. That's sort of the concept there. It's like you allow in reflection, you allow the best to rise to the top, and you let go of everything else. And that doesn't happen without reflection. And so what can happen then is we just are habituated in our relationships. We're habituated with the when, where, what, why, and how we do with another person. And so if we're not reflecting, then that will just usually follow the same pattern as it's followed in the past. And that's where we can get increasingly that feeling of like, I'm not with the right people.
Yeah. And I notice in my own friendship groups, like there's different cultures, right? There's the school moms, and then there's the high school group, and there's the work colleagues and sports groups. And I noticed that there's this sort of natural shape shifting of yourself with the different cultures as well. And so one of the things that I've learned to do is actually to feel into when I'm not feeling as nourished, or when I'm feeling a little like aggravated or irritated by the conversations that I've been in. I think that feedback also gives me a good opportunity to reflect how I'm not meeting my own needs or expectations, like how I perhaps wasn't resilient in that conversation to actually speak my truth. Yeah. I think that's important, because you can't always choose your friends. Important. You can't always turn them on or off, but you can definitely clear out, like when the relationships don't seem to, like you outgrow them, essentially. You can look at, all right, where am I better off spending my time and investing my time and attention? But then there's some certain structural cultures or groups that you don't have a choice. You're there and you're in the thick of it.
Yeah, that's right. And so in those situations, and this also happens to the family, right? Where it's like, you choose your friends, you don't choose your family. And that kind of speaks to the point of like, because you can choose your friends, you better choose the friends that are helping you be the person you want to become next, right? Because that's where the biggest choice is. Like you're pointing out, while sometimes it doesn't seem like you can choose your friends because those are the friends you chose in the past. And there's some good reason to keep those channels open and in those friendships, moving forward. And sometimes that means that you have to show up as who you are now, as the most evolved version of yourself in a situation where usually you're pivoting to an expired version of yourself or an outdated version of yourself. And that's where it feels really bad after, where you're like, oh, I drank too much. Oh, I ate too much. Oh, I swore too much. Oh, I acted in this way, which like is not my normal way to act, but it like brought out that expired or outdated part of my personality. And so in those situations, it's like, there's always a growth opportunity. Like that's to me what this whole conversation on outgrowing your friends. It's like, well, how do you keep yourself growing with your friends and with the friends that you've had in the past? And sometimes that means less time with certain people, right? Especially if it deeply affects your habits. And your habits are the only thing that are really moving you forward, having better habits. But then the other part of it is like, actually accept the challenge. Like as you get stronger, accept the challenge. So like, actually, how do you show up in the most updated, forward-facing, growth-oriented personality of yourself with the people you were friends with in the past, who maybe are more in a fixed mindset or not on a growth journey or not getting coaching or not investing in themselves and are really, really kind of stuck, because you might be the brightest light they have. And that, I promise, will be very engaging, right? It engages us right at our edge when we're doing that. So I'll speak a little bit more to that. There's a lot in here around being in the truth of your experience and speaking from that. So say someone says like, everyone gains weight as they get older. And you're thinking like, that's actually not true. Like, do you challenge, or do you ask questions or probe? to see if they like why they believe that. And you could even say like, why do you believe that's really like true for everybody, and why? Like, why do you believe that? And they might point to some really good examples, because most people are gaining weight right now. So like that there's plenty of evidence to say like that is true. And then asking more questions around like, do you have people always been doing that? Right? Have people always been gaining weight as they've been aging, or is this maybe more of a modern cultural phenomenon? And so what this does is like, especially if you can come to it a place with curiosity, it builds a bridge of trying to understand, which is empathetic, like really trying to understand where someone else's perspective is, knowing that there's not necessarily a right or wrong here. It's different. And you can learn so much from that. I find like most of my creative material, if you will, comes from having conversations with people who think really differently than me, that have a very different life experience and have different assumptions from me. And then, even a podcast like this, or a book, or a blog post, or a newsletter, or a course is a response to that, right? So even though I'm not talking to someone who's naturally inspiring me, I'm not necessarily motivated by, but I'm still learning, because there's always that opportunity to just open our minds, ask better questions, and learn. So if you feel like you're outgrowing your friends and certain friends you're with, what you might pause and say like, what's a better question I can ask that might move the conversation in a different way, that I could learn something I actually want to learn?
Almost as if it's its own skill set. As you were talking, I was thinking, how many conversations are very open-ended like that, where there is and it's part of deep listening, right? Is to be able to ask questions and then pause and listen. How many people interrupt each other and don't actually have that skill of listening? And I love that idea of being curious and asking questions, particularly because if we make an assumption that we know that person and we already know what they're going to say, and if we feel like they've got a fixed mindset, then being able to rather than being defensive and maybe like try to get on a soapbox, but just to take that step back.
Yeah. Because like the soapbox, especially with friends, is never gonna work. I find most friends like don't want advice. Like they're not my coaching members. Yeah. They're not asking me for advice. They're not using the free resource at their disposal, as I always remind my 13-year-old daughter. Right.
It's a good point, because I think when I feel least at ease in my conversations, it's where I feel like I've been on a soapbox and I've come across a bit of a know-it-all.
Right, because we leave those situations with a residue, and the residue is like there was not an open, like the question wasn't asked. Like I gave the answer to the question that wasn't asked.
Yeah, and it's okay as well, I think, if you leave the conversation without giving your opinion.
Oh yeah, like that's often the hardest thing to do, especially for people that are on a growth path and something's really working, right? And it's like they think everyone wants to feel better. And maybe that's not the case too.
Yeah.
So now let's talk a little bit about how to actually grow a social network or a professional network that actually is growth oriented, like how we can take that upon ourselves to actually grow that. Because there's this thing here, I think there's a bit of an assumption when someone's outgrowing their friends. I've seen it time and again. And the assumption is that like, better friends should find them, like better people that are more growth oriented, like people that will be, again, easy, inspiring to learn from, will motivate them, will just be great people to connect with, where you feel that really great sense of like, oh my gosh, I just love hanging out with you because it's just phenomenal. Like there's connection, there's honesty, there's truth, and it's life positive, and it's going somewhere. It's truly an evolutionary partnership. Most people are like, why doesn't that just happen to me? And that's victim mindset. So it's like, you're actually if you're asking yourself that, and believe me, like I've been there, I'm speaking both from experience and from a lot of training. You have to take it on yourself. And sometimes the first steps of that is actually just like writing a list down of like, who are those people that you are somewhat intersecting with, of just like writing a list of like, who are you learning from, right? Who are you motivated by? right? Who makes you laugh? Or who do you enjoy being with, right? And who are you inspired by? And writing a list of people that maybe some of them you already know and could grow those friendships, and maybe some of them you don't know, but like, wow, it'd be amazing to be friends with that person. So you have people that are less of a reach, and then you people are more of a reach, but now you're taking the ability to build growth-oriented friendships on yourself. And the more we take on that responsibility to do that, the more we notice that like great people are connected to great people. And so through the transitive property of it was funny. My niece asked my dad how to make friends, and I love this story because it's like the sweetest thing. It's like the sweetest. It was the sweetest conversation, totally in earnest. And my dad said, "You don't need to make friends. You need to make a friend." Because friends have friends. It's the transitive property, right? A equals B, B equals C, A equals C. So if you're A and you're friends with B and B's friends with C, like chances are you'll get to know C. But now you know that, especially if like B is a player, right? They're growth oriented, they're motivated, they're inspired, they're paying attention to people that help them grow. C is going to, if they're paying attention to C, chances are that person will be like that too. And so when we take the responsibility on ourselves to build the kind of social network and professional network that we want to be in, then all of a sudden things start to change in our lives. We actually see opportunities start to come in. We follow through on phone calls. We reach out. We ask questions. We try to help people that we want to be friends with. Like we actually, like, how can you be useful to that person? That's a great, great way to start a friendship.
And Cate, can you talk about intergenerational relationships and how we should factor that in?
Yeah. So, I mean, most people find that if their relationships in general aren't if they notice that there's lack, it's like a really good thing to look at is like, well, how much are you weaved into the intergenerational picture? Meaning, do you have friends that are older than you? Do you have friends that are kids? Do you have friends that are teenagers? Do you have friends that are young adults? We know that companies that have more diversity in their company and in positions actually of influence, right, that are of different generations, are more creative. So to me, that speaks volumes to like, right, to be a creative person, you want to have good, strong relationships with people that are older and people that are younger. I saw actually in doing a little bit of research for this podcast, I found this website that is fascinating. It's called keepinggood.company. And it's wild. It's all about companionship. This website, it looks like it's out of the UK, and it's mostly for the elderly, like just helping people get on the, just reaching out, like just having like, so people are paying other people to reach out to their elders essentially, instead of developing those relationships themselves. And like, like the more the merrier, like it's not a bad strategy, especially if you can't do it or won't do it, or you just want more attention to your elderly population. But it's like such a great reminder of how much we need connection, and how much with living in, single family units, like we've destroyed the connection often between the elders and the youngers, and that connection provided utility, right? Where people that were older were taking care of infants and babies, people that needed a lot of childcare, right? Or needed a lot of growth-oriented attention and education. That was like part of the extended family structure. So we've in some ways thrown the baby out with the bathwater there, right? And we might look at like, oh, if most of my friends are within the decade of which I was born, 5 years older, 5 years younger, like maybe I should be looking more towards having relationships with people that have been on the planet longer, or people that, it's like what I can learn from a millennial influencer in marketing strategy is like the sky's the limit there, right? Because I'm Gen X. And so that open-mindedness, especially in building professional networks. So for people who are interested in building professional networks, is like, you want to write down a list of what people that you want to be connected, like who you want to be connected to according to generation, like people in their 20s, people in their 30s, people in their 40s, people in their 50s, people in their 60s, people in their 70s, maybe even a person or two in their 80s. And your connection could be a few different ways, especially for professional work. just like letting yourself be influenced by.
Hey, it's Cate. And my question is, do you need to change your life? Like, seriously? Do you need a shift? So I have a 10-day crash course for you to get aligned for action. And there's 3 basic parts to it. One is you ignite your ambition and clarify your vision. The second is you align your time and your space to fulfill that vision and activate your ambition. And the third part is we usually need to do this with other people. There's usually other people that are part of our vision. And we need a plan. And that's the third part. So it's 10 days. It's fast. Because you're a podcast listener, I get to give you a discount. You can find the special discount link in the show notes, or it's yogahealer.com/change-your-life-exclusive. It's a $500 course. Because you're a podcast listener, you can get it for $47. It's well worth it. I promise it's more than worth the $47. Like, if you really do it, it will help you step into your next ambitions with clarity, with a better plan, and with your head screwed on right and pointed forward to go into action. Again, yogahealer.com/change-your-life-exclusive. It's worth the $47.
Yeah, I love the idea of cultivating relationships and working towards surrounding yourself with relationships that are in alignment with who you wanting to become. I also like the idea of looking at the relationships that you're in and seeing where the resistance is coming from and being more curious, like asking questions, because it's like a habit, right? Sometimes those things that you have more resistance to are the ones that you need the most. So that perhaps as well, like, I think getting that feedback when you're in your networks, like, what reflection are you coming up with, and how is that inspiring you to look at your own limiting beliefs or your own maybe inner critic? Like, if you're feeling bad about a particular relationship, maybe you need to surround yourself with different people, and maybe it's just a phase. Relationships don't always have to be carried on forever. There's a chat. I've often a lot of like, I've had an elder, I don't know whether it was an aunt or maybe a grandparent, say to me, like, when you're upset about letting go of friendships, there's a phase or a chapter for that particular evolution of yourself, and then letting that go.
Right. That's right. Yeah. And that sense of like, if you don't have anything in common, if there's no way that you are connecting around growth, that there's no commonalities there, like, that's a good sign. I mean, I have people that I just do sports activities with, but we grow in that area and we push each other, and it's great fun. And we've been hanging out for a long time. So there's that familiarity, which is so important, and then, I'd say more and more though, like, if you look at any one of your goals, because so much of what we do is help people first determine what their goals are and then achieve those goals. And what happens with that process is that people start to have goals that are much bigger than the ones they've had in the past. And as soon as your goals are bigger, you need a new network. You need a network of people that achieves greater goals at that level or higher than that level. Because the people that have achieved goals higher than the level that you're aiming for next, they look at your level and they're like, that's easy. Why? Because they did it a long time ago. And they know what they had to learn to get there. They remember. People remember where they have scars. Think about it on your own body. Actually, I had this neurotherapy where this doctor this is down here in Mexico. They do this a lot down here. It's like prolotherapy and nerve therapy, where they go into every place you've had scar tissue and they inject very tiny doses of Novocaine to see if it can change the way that change certain patterns in the body. Essentially, it's a way of actually relaxing nerves from firing muscles that are in a constant state of contraction. So they go into all these places. So at one point, this doctor was like, where else? Like, where else is there scar tissue on your body? And I remembered, there was this from when I was in 3rd grade, and it was Valentine's Day. And, Valentine's Day, everyone's like passing out the Valentines, and there's like sugar everywhere, right? Those little stupid candy hearts. Well, they're not stupid. They're cute, but they're like just sugar bombs, right? So there's that situation, 3rd graders, which are roughly 9 years old, like running around all over the place. I trip and fall and gash my lip like really deep. So it's like blood everywhere. So they call the office. My mom comes, brings me to the doctor, and they put stitches in my lip. You remember where you have scars. The body doesn't forget. Same thing with wisdom teeth. Same thing with like any, gosh, like everywhere. Like the body remembers, even if you were out, even if you were anesthetized, the body remembers where you have scars. And that's how it is with growth. So when you start playing a bigger game in your life and deciding to really step into your potential, right? That means by definition, playing with new people, right? And some of the people that you know now become a lot more important. And because you have limited time, right? Some of the people you know become less important, and that's natural. So when people are trying to set, they're setting bigger goals and they're reaching into like, wow, who's actually done this? Well, who did this a while back? At that point, you're often, not always, but you're often pushed right into intergenerational relationships because these people they just have had more time. They've had more time to do it. I look at Brian Tracy. I mean, the guy's written 70 or 80 books. Right. Well, he's like 70 or 80 years old. So like at some point he was cranking them out like a couple a year, right? And went to hyper production mode. If I look at like people like Deepak Chopra, like hyper productive, but also have a couple years on me. Right. So it's like great people to pay attention to, like, how are they able to produce as the thought leader in in a way that seems like there was an engine behind it. Right. And to them, they'll remember back to their second book because they were there and there was scar tissue there, and they'll remember back to their 10th or 20th book and there was scar tissue there, or whatever the goal is. And same thing with wealth goals. There's like, there's a lot of sayings around like, first time someone breaks a 6-figure glass ceiling, right? There's that. And then it's a little easier to do that again. And it's easier to go higher than that. And same thing with people are hitting 1 million or 10 million or at every ceiling, right? There's people that have broken through it. And if there are a few ceilings beyond you, they'll look back and be like, oh yeah, I had to learn sales or something.
Yeah. Right? It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's about how to use your time. Like, I think when you look at the pain,
use your awareness and your time as a,
yeah. A lot of the same thing's true. Now, people are distracting themselves.
Yeah. Exactly. They are. And they're not asking, I mean, this is, part of the other questions that we have in our list around this is like what happens at work? Like, how do you lead? How do you lead in your family? How do you lead in your friends? How do you lead at work? How do you become a leader at work? How do you start to add more meaning to your work and to your life? And a lot of that is like you're saying, like, where are you pointing your time? Which is like, where are you pointing your attention? And so when people show up and they just complain about like, well, this isn't working or that's not working, and I'm being asked to do too much, like they're never going to be a leader, right? Because they're not demonstrating the behaviors of leadership. Now, part of the behaviors of leadership are actually you do what we talked about in the beginning. You step back and you reflect. And like at work, one of the questions is like, where is this business trying to go? And you look at the big picture. Now you're plugged into the whole. So like when the body's hurt, you don't want to just be plugged into the injury, right? You want to be plugged into the body as a whole and say like, what's the body trying to do? Well, it's trying to heal this one part. Okay, but can I take care of the body as a whole so it can take care of that one part? So you think holistically. That's what holistic thinking does, is it brings you into the whole. Where is this organization or organism trying to go? Where is this family trying to go? Like, what could it do next? What could we experience next as a family? You can look at a friend group, you could look at a book club, or you could look at if you're a bunch of guys and you play pickup, you could say like, what are we actually trying to do next? Because maybe if everyone wants to lose weight, maybe we shouldn't drink 12 beers when we're done with the game, right? Like maybe we should change the venue. Maybe we should change the menu. And realizing that that's actually what leaders do, is they get their attention on the whole, where the whole could go. That's potentiality, right? And then what happens is in that, from directing their attention, is like better ideas that are more system solutions start to pop up. Whereas when people aren't leading at work, usually what it is, or they're not leading their family, or they're not leading on their friend group, is they're just focused on like one little tiny aspect or one part of the part, and they're focused on it negatively. And then what you pay attention to grows, right? And what you put your time into, you're more likely to put time into again. So if you like normally, if like today, you just check on your phone and see what apps you've used and whatnot. And if you've spent an hour and a half on news apps or social apps, chances are tomorrow you'll do that again. So when we start to change that stuff, like chances are we're more cognizant of what we're doing.
Yeah. I think like it's important as well. Like I always come back to this. I seem to be talking about it a lot. This famous palliative care nurse in Australia wrote the book 5 Regrets of the Dying. And I think we have to create the space and the time for friendships and relationships. And I see that people don't do it. I see that I don't always do it. I often become quite selfish in my goals. And I think this is where, like Cate, the system you've designed with Master of You and the 5 element, really we can't break through our next level of success when we don't have enough play and friendship and connection. Yeah. And so
if we're working 40 hours a week and if we're with our family, like another 20, 25 hours a week, we're not going to have as much time with friends. So it's so important that we're choosing how we're showing up at work and we're choosing how we're showing up with our family, that we're actually choosing to lead in these environments so that we're surrounded by people who are helping us grow, because we can train that. We can train people by modeling the way. And to me, it's absolutely essential. And we find that friends come in, like the right people start to show up, because the kids will have smarter friends or better friends. And the people at work will connect you to other people that'll help you grow. I mean, we see it all the time at Yoga Healer as in course members, right? Master View members, Body Thrive members, Living Ayurveda course members, Yoga Health Coaching members. They come in and they're not signing up. They talk to Anna usually to sign up. They're not coming to Anna saying like, I've outgrown my friends. And I want to come to this course because I need friends that are growth oriented, right? What happens though is they come to the course and then when they leave the course after, a lot of our courses are a year, some are 2 years. Many people stay for multiple years beyond that, go to course to course, is they're like, I've made my best friends in this community. Why? So I've had to step back and look at like, why is that happening? We have ground rules for how we show up. Everyone's here for a reason and they know their reason. And we network them together so that they show up in ways that are growth oriented with each other. And then in their life, they haven't often updated those relationships or found other connections like that in their community. And so more and more, it's like essential to me that, in our training that we train people how to do that, and that just becomes a natural part of life. Because this shouldn't, in my experience, like this shouldn't be effortful. This shouldn't be another thing on your to-do list. It's like, there's already people you're going to run into this week. How do you show up to lead the way? How do you show up in growth-oriented mindset? How do you show up in the emerging version of yourself, and instead of letting yourself just slip back to lowest common denominator factor and go to like, whatever the pattern in the relationship is.
Yeah. I love it. I love this idea of being available to looking at the right structures that are going to bring out the best in yourself, your colleagues, your friends, your family. I find in a course community like Yoga Healer, I've been a course member and a mentor, and now I'm a coach on the business team. And I found that the relationship skills that I've built in that process has translated back into my family, into my relationships with parents and children and nieces and nephews, and then also with my community. It's fantastic. Like I feel like as an introvert as well, that's been really important for me, because I used to play small, never think of myself as a leader. And we have our personality tendencies, and that doesn't matter. We can still shapeshift and reach our full potential and not limit ourselves from helping the world be a better place, if you like.
Yeah. And for you, like modeling the way for your 3 kids, modeling the way for the groups that your family's friends with, like it's, yeah. And then that's what makes it so much more interesting and growth oriented. So like for me in the last week, I've had so many conversations around chronic inflammation, just part of because of the study that came out that was this book that came out based on a number of studies that showed that like, modern humans are dying of chronic inflammation. You could call it heart disease. You could call it chronic stress. You could call it COVID. You could call it cancer. You could call it respiratory disease. You could call it diabetes or obesity or arthritis, but what it all really is chronic inflammation. So what I'm finding is like, I'm asking all sorts of people about it in different ways, and I'm learning, and it could be the retirees that live where I live in Mexico, who I normally don't have too much in common with. But there's always a place to like understand more what people are actually thinking about something that you're interested in. And that will spark, it'll definitely spark new ways of thinking about it and talking about it, connected and more portable. So I hope, just in closing this conversation, just a few reminders, like become aware. I think that was our first point, right? Like to become aware after a conversation, after hanging out with friends or a friend, like let yourself digest the experience, notice how you showed up, notice how the conversation went. Like, was it growth oriented? Did you laugh? Did you learn? Did you grow? Were you inspired or motivated? Or did you like go drink more wine at home or whatnot, eat some chocolate? Like, did you kind of check out, or were your emotions lower after or higher after? And then just deciding like, hey, who do you want to be next? Like, what are your next goals? Now, who's done that? And who's a few steps beyond that? Whether you know them or don't know them, start asking around, get a list of names, and then start to pursue the relationships that you want to have next. And then lastly, like, be a leader. Think holistically, think at work, think in terms of what the whole organism is trying to do, and show up in service of that, and start to lead from the place that you are into that. Because the more you do that, the stronger network you're going to create at work. If you can't do that at work, it's probably time to find a new job, right? And then show up that way at home, because you can't find a new family. So at home, think of the whole organism of the family. What's the family trying to, like, what are the goals you're trying to accomplish as a family next? And then how do you show up in service of that as a leader? And then the more we do that, the more we'll naturally do that with friends. Yeah. Thanks so much, Anna, for help. It's much easier for me to do this than monologue. So I really appreciate being my conversational partner on this.
Yeah.
Anything you want? So if listeners want to talk to you about courses, where should we send them?
Yeah, we'll send them to www.yogahealer.com/conversation. And it's going to be a great conversation about getting clear on what you want and what your challenges are, and how we can come up with some solutions. And so I look forward to seeing a few people jump on board and really just getting honest about where you're at and how you can become a leader in your own relationships and your own life, your workplace.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And just to reflect on something you said earlier about like listening deeply, and this conversation that you'll have with us, you'll experience what it's like when someone's listening deeply, and then asking questions that bring you into even more gravity with where you're at and what you really want. And it's a beautiful gift that we're able to offer you as a podcast listener. Thanks, Anna.
Thanks, Cate.